In December 1918, for the first time in its history, a woman was elected to the House of Commons. In contrast to what we might expect, this was not one of the leaders of the women's suffrage campaign, like Christabel Pankhurst, who also stood for election in 1918, but instead a woman best known for her involvement in another defining struggle of the 19th and early 20th century. Constance Markievicz was the Sinn Féin candidate for the constituency of St Patrick's in Dublin, and in line with the policy of this Republican and pro-independence party, she refused to take her seat. As Markievicz made clear in her election address, written from Holloway prison, where she and many other members of Sinn Féin had been interned for the last months of the First World War, "I would never take an oath of allegiance to the power I meant to overthrow." You see, Markievicz was committed to representing her constituents, not at Westminster, but in Dublin, in the city she hoped would become the capital of a free, independent and republican Ireland. While histories of Constance Markievicz have traditionally focused on this act of political resistance to the British state, what is perhaps less well known is that the first woman to be elected to the House of Commons may have been disqualified from sitting in any case, on not one, but two counts. The first reason relates to the cause of Markievicz's earlier imprisonment in Mountjoy and Aylesbury prisons, her conviction of treason for the role she played in the Easter Rising of 1916, having served as second in command of a company of the Irish Citizen Army at St Stephen's Green. Markievicz, who had pleaded not guilty, was found guilty and sentenced to death. This sentence was only commuted on account of her sex. As the Erskine May Guide to Parliamentary Practice states, a person attainted or adjudged guilty of treason or felony and not having endured the punishment to which he was adjudged or received a pardon is disqualified from membership of either House of Parliament. The second reason why Markievicz was disqualified from sitting as an MP is more surprising and relates to her unusual surname. Constance Gore Booth had married Polish Count Casimir Dunin Markievicz in 1900. At this moment she lost her British nationality, which, according to Erskine May, disqualified her from becoming an MP. While the couple separated in 1909, they remained married, and as such, Constance was unable to apply for naturalisation, which would have restored her citizenship. As a consequence of the Naturalisation Act of 1870, British women would continue to lose their citizenship upon marrying non-British men until 1948. This caused great inconvenience and real problems for many women, some of whom lost jobs in the civil service and pensions, and could even lead to women finding themselves stateless. As Crystal Macmillan informed a select committee on the subject in 1923, women feel it is a great insult that they should have nationality imposed upon them without their consent. All this raises the question of why Markievicz had been allowed to stand for election in the first place, if her previous conviction of treason and loss of British citizenship disqualified her from sitting in the House of Commons. The short answer is that there was no vetting at the candidacy stage to bar those disqualified from sitting as MPs fighting an election. It was simply not the job of returning officers to determine if candidates were qualified or not, only to confirm that the candidate was appropriately nominated and had paid their fees. In fact, there is a long history of disqualified candidates being elected. Daniel O'Connell was elected in a stunning 1828 by-election victory, even though, as a Roman Catholic, he was unable to take his seat. His victory proved to be a key moment in the struggle for Catholic emancipation, a measure passed the following year. While the runner-up in the 1918 St Patrick's contest, the incumbent William Field, was entitled to challenge Markievicz's election, the scale of the Sinn Féin landslide, the expense of taking the matter to court, and beginning of the Irish War of Independence in January 1919 probably dissuaded him from doing so. Similarly, it would have been politically inflammatory for Parliament or the government to bar Markievicz or any Sinn Féin member of Parliament convicted of treason from taking their seat if they had tried, regardless of the fact that Markievicz never took her seat and was technically disqualified from doing so. Her electoral victory with 7,835 votes to Field's 3,742 was decisive and didn't stop her from representing her constituents. While legend has it she visited Westminster only once, in disguise to see her name on the allocated coat peg in the members' cloakroom, she represented St Patrick's, Dublin, in the Assembly of Ireland. She also became the Assembly's Secretary for Labour in 1919, making her one of the earliest female cabinet ministers in Europe. She held this post until 1922, albeit interrupted by further imprisonments. What makes Markievicz's achievements all the more impressive is that she won her election contest less than a year after the first women had been granted the vote, and only weeks after women were permitted to become MPs. Also, unlike the next 3 female MPs to be elected, Nancy Astor, Margaret Rinchingham and Mabel Phillipson, she didn't have the advantage of stepping into a seat previously held by her husband. When we consider the considerable prejudice against women candidates across the UK, of which there were 17 in 1918, and the fact that even prominent suffrage campaigners like Christabel Pankhurst failed to break through that year, Markievicz's achievement becomes all the more remarkable. She may not have sat on the green benches of the House of Commons, but in the history of women and politics, she was a true trailblazer.